Basically, what I'm supposed to talk about is awareness, 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 and awareness, and awareness. It's a word. What does it really mean? I must say that, Mrs. Drabble, you made an impression, because this is all what awareness is really about. Finding the patients. Now, you went to the GPs, and what do we expect from the GPs? I lecture in the medical school, and out of the 5.5 years of medical training, our students get 25 minutes of primary immunodeficiency diseases. How do you expect your GP to understand what this is all about? He's not interested in PIDs, he's interested in heart disease, in diabetes, in those big diseases, and therefore we need to start to raise awareness already from medical school and from nursing school and even among the public to get to. I think it's illustrative that the public, you got it from one of your friends that told you about this disease. So we know that we have to increase awareness at the very bottom. What about specialists? We do think that once you come to university hospital, you're saved. Let me give you one example of one of my patients. Let's call her Mrs. P. She went to the pulmonary clinic in our hospital for recurrent pneumonias. So it was written in the files that she comes again with the pneumonia. And somebody took immunoglobulin levels, and it was noticed in her files that, oh yeah, she has no antibodies. And now she comes again. What are we going to do about that? Sorry to say that that does happen even in university clinics. I think we can all come up with examples of that. So I think that for me is the meaning of the word awareness. There are so many patients out there that we still need to diagnose. And even though I wave my hand when we say we have a lot of patients that I know of in Sweden, I would still say that I only know of about 10 to 15% of all the patients in Sweden. The rest are out there somewhere. Some are diagnosed, but probably the majority are not. So that is my first bullet point, as you can see on the slide. The second bullet point is national referral centers. Why do we need national referral centers? Yes, because these diseases are rare. Now, taken together, it's quite a number of patients. In Sweden, for instance, we think there are about 30 to 35,000 patients in Sweden alone, in a country with 10 million people. So there are a number of patients out there, but we need to have centers who know about these patients, who know about the diagnostic tools, who know about the treatment, who has the genetic expertise, the clinical expertise. We need to build patient registers to understand what are the numbers of patients, where are they, and what are we doing to them, and clinical trials, are we doing the right things? Now, let me give you one example why we need centers, national referral centers, that could either be national, and in fact, many of us are Jeffrey Modell centers, which have been the start, I would say, of national centers, the seed for national centers. Let me tell you the story of another of my patients. This is Mrs. L, and she had been taken care of quite properly. She was in a university infectious disease clinic. She had been diagnosed with common variable immunodeficiency. They knew she had antibody deficiency. She was given gamma globulin, but they couldn't really understand why she kept having these cold abscesses. Why did she have infections? Why was her hip destroyed and had to be replaced? Why was her shoulder destroyed and need to be replaced? And they couldn't really figure out. So they called me, and after hip replacement and shoulder replacement and whatever replacement, it took me about 30 seconds to diagnose the patient, and it took about €10 to treat her, to get rid of the infection that she was actually having, because she was carrying ureaplasma, which is typical for patients with CVID, but nobody really thinks about it because you don't see it in an infectious disease clinic, because this is not a pathogen that you think of as a pathogen, but rather for our CVID patients, it really is a pathogen. So therefore, you need centers, you need to collect patients, you need to have the expertise in this field. Now the third bullet point is neonatal, yes, I'll put it up. The third bullet point is neonatal screening. We need to find the patients early. We need to find the severe forms of severe immunodeficiencies, like severe combined immunodeficiency, because this is life-saving. If you find a child with a SCID, a severe combined immunodeficiency, and you transplant this child before the age of 6 months, they will all survive. You wait for until 1 year of age, well, 60% will survive. You wait until 2 years of age and virtually no one will survive. So it's a matter of finding these patients early. And the question is then, what do we do? Well, we have a neonatal screening program in place in most countries where we screen for metabolic diseases. Sweden, like many other countries, are somewhere there at the bottom of the list. We only screen for 5 diseases. And we do think that we are not doing particularly well. But the word is that we've been doing this now for 30 years and it's been working fine. Why rock the boat? And we're trying to rock the boat because we're trying to get the authorities, and that's where we need your help, because they need this push to actually implement screening for a number of other diseases. I'm not saying SCID is on the top of the list. There are many other diseases that are in the pipeline of getting into the neonatal screening program, but there's a push needed. And after that push has been done, SCID is going to be one on the list to do it. Now, the experience in the US, where Jeffrey Modell Foundation has been instrumental in getting this done, we know that there are a couple of states in the US who already started to do neonatal screening. One of the first was Jack Routz, who's doing this in Wisconsin, who's one of my friends. And he started the program basically last year in full scale, screening 68,000 children, the ones that are born in Wisconsin each year, finding the first SCID, bone marrow transplanting the first SCID, and everything went well. So far this year they found 2 or maybe even 3 SCIDs during the screening program, and I think, Fred, you may be touching upon this later, how this is now spreading. And I think that in Europe we're at least 5 years behind, and I don't see the reason why. We have the knowledge, we have the test, we have the possibilities. I have, in my hospital, I have every single sample from every child born in Sweden every year. I can even go retrospectively, and I did that. I went back to look at all the SCIDs in Sweden to see, could we have diagnosed them? And the answer is, of course, yes. We could have found them early on. Fourth point is health economics. Because what the administrators of my hospital say that, if you find all these patients, it's going to cost a lot of money. And actually, one of my friends was fired, basically, from a university hospital because he found too many patients, and they told him, you're costing us too much. So we need to understand that finding, diagnosing, and treating the patients is actually beneficial, or you earn money from doing that. I used to say, doing well by doing good. So you do it for the patients and still you earn money. So we have that appropriate diagnosis of these children and other patients is life-saving sometimes. We have the quality of life improvement, which you cannot really put a number on, but again, Mrs. Drabble, you put it very nicely, saying that. And I have seen many of those patients in my clinic as well. Let's take one of those, Roland, who was a blood donor, whom I first met some 30 years ago. He was IgA deficient, so he was very popular as a blood donor, but that was it, and he was doing fine. And then I didn't meet him for some 20 years. And over these years, he got more and more tired, he got more and more infections, he didn't really want to be a blood donor anymore. And when I saw him 20 years later, his life had changed completely. He fell asleep. Whenever he came home at night, he fell asleep. He, as you said, he couldn't go out, he got infections, and he was diagnosed at that time. He came to my clinic, and of course he had a CVID. He had developed a CVID during the course of these 20 years. From being relatively benign disease, IgA deficiency, he had a few more infections, but not really very much. He came down to the point of being a CVID. And when he came to us, he didn't realize, because this is a slow progression. It had taken 20 years for him to get to the bottom. So it was so slow that he didn't really realize that he was becoming a patient, a CVID patient. So when he was treated in our clinic, Mrs. Drabble, yes, he got a new life. He got back, he could do things. He didn't fall asleep in front of the television set on Friday. He could do things with his family, with his children. And he, as you said, he was given a new life. I think that's also very important. And then, as was touched upon as the last point, the economic incentive, doing well by doing good. Please remember that. Because both in the US and in Europe, we've been doing the calculations, and the maths clearly show that it's highly beneficial in terms of funding or money to find the patients and treat them. In the US, you're talking about something like $70,000, $80,000. In Europe, since something like 2006, we have the equivalent where we say EU standards for societal benefits, which is 60,000 euro per year for a full life, which is a patient who is actually being treated. So with that, I finished my bullet points, you all saw that, and I think that I wanted for this time to put some flesh behind my bullet points, to show you the patients and how much this really means to them. But we need your help, because in Sweden and in many other member states, there's a push needed from the EU Parliament to say that this is actually important, because everybody realizes it, but nobody's really getting the incentive to do it. So an initiative from you here would be most beneficial to our patients, and that is the best thing you can do to support them to actually get this done. Thank you very much.